Dan Bowran told me about the range of techniques he's used over the years and how he embraces having an experimental edge to his work to trigger new ideas and previously unknown production methods.
What's it like seeing your work, even an older piece of work, here in this gallery fronting onto High Street Paran?
Yeah, it's great. It's kind of funny evolution of going around well, not around in circles, but spirals and evolutions, I guess, because this is where I started with stained glass and flat glass, and then I kind of went off in this direction of using kilns and hot shops and other things, and then I'm back now as a student here at Melbourne Poly, back into flat glass and LED lighting and stuff. So it's a funny slot in to have this here, and yeah, as I was saying, it's kind of something I haven't seen for a few years. I made it maybe a decade or so ago, and it's basically a little cityscape inside here. So there's lots of little things going on that are in some imaginary city with skyscrapers, and there's a little east end of factories and housing, and then it goes off into a little kind of posher houses, and then it's got little churches and so forth. So all these little details I forgot about, so it's funny to come back to. And then I mentioned the glass actually, which is a different glass, which is really specific to Australia actually, and even more so Victoria. It's made by James Thompson in Blackwood Crystal, and this glass is, this particular glass even, we went and saw him physically making the glass from all the silica and the colorants and the elements. So it's kind of amazing to have the glass, this kind of piece, from little particles and bits of sand and everything, and to kind of see it through the process of doing its thing and then evolving into a piece that's now on display in the sunshine. So it's great, really.
You've obviously devoted an awful lot of time to working with glass.
Yeah.
What's the buzz with glass for you? Why glass?
It's very, I think what I do like about, there's lots of things about it. One of the things I like is that it's one of the first mediums that we actually worked with, it's believed, is the obsidian trade routes in prehistoric times are one of, literally kind of moved humans out of whatever era we were in into the Stone Age essentially, and they started napping obsidian, and there's obsidian trade routes, prehistoric ones that are seen. So it's a funny medium that humans and pre-humans seem to have an affinity with this glassy substance. And basically once you're using it, you can use it in different formats, as far as you can work with it as a stone in this case, or you can work with it in a liquid kind of form. You can use it in slumping, softer form. So it has a good range of where you can slot your process in. For me, you can use it in those forms. You can cut and paste with them a bit. So you could make this whole piece, and then you could go and slump it, or you could do other things with it. So a lot of what I do, I guess, the experimental stuff is in the hot shop. It's kind of taking these kiln-based techniques and putting them in a hot shop where the glass is different, so it reacts a bit differently, but it's also less precious because you don't have to invest so much time into the object where you would with casting. So I can kind of do sketches, if you like, and kind of little process tests of what would happen if we made this and made this, and then say put this back onto a pipe and started blowing the cities up, for example, and enlarging those and distorting those into bubbles instead of just voids, for example. That's not what you could do with this, but it's an example of where you could take something like this because it's glass essentially.
I was fascinated to watch your video of the work you've been doing, making those beautiful plant holders. And I had never imagined, wouldn't even have thought to ask the question as to how you got those bubbles off the side by just putting wire around.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. We were using copper wire when wrapping it around, and it was funny. It's probably a good example of where you jump off in a process to what's you have the kind of research that's relatively easy to find. We're using copper wire. So copper's, it's got a similar coefficient of expansion to glass. That means that when it contracts and cools, it doesn't break off and doesn't. If you put steel through here or something, the glass would bond to it and they cool at a different rate and the glass would crack off. Where copper, you don't have that problem, so that's why we're using copper. But we actually started using a high heat wire that using kilns, and that was, we were thinking was good because we could put the marks into the glass and then cut that framework off, and then you'd have the piece that's essentially moulded. But the glass was actually too hot and forming around and embedding that wire in, so we were ending up with different issues. And then we started using the copper, and actually the copper was melting in and doing the same, but then we worked out we could rip it out, so you're getting nice kind of traces of the copper in the glass and things like that. So yeah, it's kind of, yeah, it's basically, yeah, exactly. And it's kind of the process of blowing into a basket kind of form to get that's relatively old really. It's like an old mould blowing technique essentially. And then keeping that wire or the mould embedded and using the mould as part of the final product, that's maybe a relatively modern phenomenon of thinking in that sense. And then kind of developing what that mould would be and how you can utilise it in the final objects, I guess an extension of that.
So the big question is, where do your ideas come from?
Oh, I think they come from everywhere really. It depends on the project you're doing and what, if it's, for me, for a long time, I keep going back to prehistoric stuff, which is, I think one of the main things about that is it's a bit of a mystery to me of why I'm fascinated about that era. Yeah, it really depends what you're doing. If you're getting like a commission or something, then you kind of have a fairly predetermined theme, you might say, to stick to, and timelines. So the timelines kind of bring in restrictions. Budgets do, and access to workshops, things like that. So I guess all of these elements just come together, but essentially you don't really, you're just always working in a way. I guess I've studied for a long time, so you're always looking at things, thinking about things, wondering about techniques and processes and how you would develop them. And for example, blowing these voids up into bubbles, I hadn't really thought about that before. But it may be a good technique actually, if I thought about it a bit more and worked that out in the hot shop, because you'd end up with forms that I haven't quite seen yet. But then of course you can go and research into that, and someone would have probably done something a bit closer to that. Or
I find it fascinating the difference between the finished object, which you can see here in a gallery like this, and the blood, sweat and tears that goes into making it.
Yeah, it's something that becomes quite obsessive and addictive, and then looking at an object like this and other ones I've done, I kind of like having this as a register of process and what I do, but I wouldn't want to be launching back into doing this process, for example, because it's too labour intensive to be a product that's sellable for the time that you put into it. But it really was never the point. So it's more, I like having experimental edge to it, and then developing that, and it just gives you a register for later on, I guess.
It's the old dilemma of you want to be as creative as possible, but you've also got to pay the bills.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of studying, as you kind of sitting in a format, and if you're lucky, or doing, I guess I'm saying studying in a broad sense. I've done quite a few residencies and artist in residence and so forth. So those kind of things are great because you can go in and you're not essentially, well, you're studying still, but you're there as an artist in residence, so you kind of have free access to the studios, and if they're great studios, you can have people to help you, and that means suddenly things that you couldn't do by yourself, or people can bring new skills to the project that you were doing, and you can really move stuff along really quickly in new directions other than you could just being in a studio by yourself. So that's definitely a way that I work a lot, is with people and doing residencies. And
how long have you known Donna?
Donna, not so long. I was after Mono, a couple of years. I actually came across. Actually, no, we had a chat maybe 5 years ago or so, a little less. I was running the Monash Glass Studios, and one day I was sitting in the office and Bronwyn walked in, and we had a great chat, and I found out who she was, and she told me about Donna, and we all got chatting. And they were actually, Bronwyn was in there to look at the glass desks, and because she helped set up the original ones with Klaus, and they were still there, and that was kind of how the poly connection for me. And they were actually setting up this school at the time, Bronwyn and Donna and others. So yeah, that was it, like maybe 5 years ago or something like that. And I always meant to come here and have a look how it was going and everything, and I was always just so busy at Monash. Kind of, you basically work during the day and at night time you go and do these things. So there wasn't, as you said, with time and passion, you kind of end up a bit obsessed with working all the time. So yeah, found my way here at last.
That's great. Yeah, I met Bronwyn originally through the John Charlton Memorial Window, which wound up in the Shrine of Remembrance restoration project by Bruce Hutton. It was a fascinating project, and it was just a great thing to discover. I mean, the fact that window had been under the floor of the church since the 1930s, I think. And no one knew what it was or where it was. Revamped the church, and there's this window. And then the Historical Society said, let's take it to the tip. And Bronwyn heard that and said, no, you won't.
It's great. I love that historical angle to glass as well. It's funny making it, because it's something I didn't say before so well, but it's an odd thing about glasses, maybe I guess other mediums as well, but it's great having this contemporary edge and unknown kind of forward thinking with it, but it's got such a great history and it's been around for so long. It really is one of the oldest mediums we've got around. I think it's the oldest synthesized medium we have as humans, but there was a natural phenomenon like obsidian and so forth.
So whilst you're very happy to be experimental and to go into new techniques and technologies and whatever, there's a sort of a constraint, I guess, on, say, LED lighting. There's certain parameters that you work with, and the creativity comes into what goes on to what you do with the glass.
It's a lot trickier for me. It's somewhat what would you say, more daunting, to be perfectly honest, because I've done a lot of work and quite skilled in all the kiln forms work and experimental work, and I've run hot shops and worked in hot shops for a long time. And that's what got me here, actually, is that something that I started with, and pretty much when I started doing LED lights and stained glass, and then as soon as I got onto putting that stuff into kilns, then you open a kiln and it's like opening a present. It's great fun. So that kind of got the bug for kiln working for me, and I left stained glass behind. So it's funny to come back to it. And my drawing isn't very prolific. So being a relatively 2D medium, it's like if you're an illustrator or you draw a lot or you're thinking two-dimensional kind of pictorial or image-based thinking, this is a great medium to work in. But personally I don't do a lot of that, so it's definitely stepping out of a comfort zone for me to be working in this, but also doing big installs like shop fronts and architectural kind of installs. So that's nice to be using glass in that format and pulling it away from object-based or functional things. So as we know, glass is everywhere, so it's kind of nice to use glass yet again in this kind of architectural sense and large-scale sense. So you can start moving away from the issue I was talking about of scaling up glass when you talk in that format, because scale suddenly isn't such an issue to deal with, where when you're dealing with objects, it is. Yeah.